Welcome back to Myths Unraveled. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. Melian was not born of the world, as many of the races of Ada were. She came before the shaping of the earth, before the sun had risen, and before time as mortals understand it began. Melian was a Melia, one of the Anina, a divine spirit created by the thought of Eru Luvatar in the timeless halls of the timeless halls. The Melia were not as great in power or majesty as the Valar, but they were still beings of immense capability, older than the world itself, and part of its very fabric. Melian was among them, not the most mighty, but one of the most graceful, wise, and enchanting. Her beauty was not just in form, but in presence. A serenity that stilled even the most restless heart, and a wisdom that radiated from her as naturally as the light of the stars. In the days before the world was made, Melian dwelt in the gardens of Lorien, where she walked among the spirits of dreams and rest. Her voice was said to be fairer than the song of the nightingale, and indeed she often walked through the groves with nightingales perched on her shoulders or flitting about her. These birds, gentle and haunting in their melody, became symbols of her presence. Even other Melia were enchanted by her music, and in the quiet of the gardens, her song could be heard weaving through the mists like a soft breeze. Unlike some of her kin, who were bound to great roles of fire, war, water, or the forging of the earth, Melian's power was more subtle, more intimate with the living world. She understood dreams, thought, harmony, and growth. Her affinity with the natural world, and with all living things, made her a being of both comfort and strength. This connection to the gentle rhythms of life would later shape the role she played in Middle-earth. But even in Valinor, her presence was deeply felt. She was counted among the servants of Vana and Este, goddesses of youth and healing, and walked often in the gardens where even the Valar found rest and renewal. Her divine origins gave her insights into the deeper patterns of fate and song. All of the Anya, including Melian, had taken part in the great music, the Aninandala, that formed the foundation of the world. This meant that her very spirit was bound up in the design of existence itself. When she looked upon the world, she did not see it as mortals did. She could sense the movements of the song still echoing through all that was created. Trees whispered not just with the wind, but with memories of their shaping. Streams murmured with purpose. The stars were not cold lights in the sky, but ancient flames lit with intention and story. Melian's connection to all of this was profound and unbreakable. But what truly set Melian apart was not only her divine essence, but her choice to enter the world of time. Many of the Melia remained in Valinor, or took on roles that kept them distant from the affairs of elves and men. Melian, however, chose to cross into Middle-earth. It was a mysterious choice, not born out of command or duty, but of desire. There was something about the vast, untamed lands of Middle-earth that called to her. Perhaps it was the music still faintly echoing in its forests and hills, or the unshaped dreams of the beings yet to awaken there. Perhaps she foresaw the need for wisdom and light in the shadows that would soon fall upon it. Whatever her reason, she came freely, walking alone into a world where few of her kind ventured. In Middle-earth, she did not immediately make herself known to the elves or any of the children of Iluvatar. She wandered the forests unseen. Her presence felt more than seen. Birds flocked to her. The air seemed clearer where she passed. Flowers bloomed more brightly, and the streams ran more purely. Her nightingales sang as she moved beneath the trees, and their song brought dreams of peace and memory to those who heard them. It was as if a part of Valinor had followed her into the mortal world, and wherever she walked, a little of its light and serenity remained. Yet despite all this gentleness, Melian was not weak. Her divine nature gave her command over powers that no mortal could hope to understand fully. The aura that surrounded her could confuse enemies, shield minds, and even bend the will of nature itself. She did not use this power freely, nor did she boast of it, but those who encountered her often felt it instinctively, a sense that they were in the presence of something far beyond their comprehension, something older and wiser and more profound than anything they had known. Melian's decision to live in Middle-earth changed the course of its history. Most Anya remained distant, working from afar or through chosen agents. Melian, however, would walk among the elves and eventually love one of them. But even before that moment, she had already altered the balance of the world simply by being in it. The very land responded to her presence. Forests thickened where she tarried. Animals were calmed. Spirits of malice and shadow avoided her. She was a beacon of the undiminished light of the West in a land that had never known it fully. Her interactions with the natural world also showed her deep understanding of time. Unlike mortals, who move through time as through a tunnel, Melian experienced it more like a great tapestry, her divine senses allowing her to see how threads would twist and pull long before the pattern was complete. She would not always act to change the course of events, for even the Melia are not masters of fate, but she could sense when the fabric of the world trembled, and she would place herself where she might best strengthen it. This prescience, combined with her deep empathy, made her a guardian of balance, a silent sentinel in the great shadow that was beginning to creep over the land. Melian's divine origin also meant that her love, when it finally came, would be something the world had never seen. When she met Eleuthingol in the woods of Nan Elmoth, their union was not just a matter of affection or desire, it was the convergence of divine and mortal, of spirit and flesh, of timelessness and time. For many years, they stood in silence, spellbound by each other's presence. Time passed, and the world moved on, but they remained locked in a moment of recognition that transcended both their natures. That moment would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Arda, for from their union would come not only a great kingdom, but a line of descent that would carry the blood of the divine into the mortal world. Melian the Melia walked in Middle-earth, not as a conqueror, not as a messenger, but as a quiet force of wisdom and grace. She brought with her the stillness of the ancient days, the wisdom of the ages, and a love for the world that defied even the weariness of immortality. Her divine origin was not just a mark of her power, it was a symbol of her role as a bridge between what was and what could be, between the light of the West and the growing darkness of the East. In her the world was reminded of its origins in song, light and purpose. In the deepening twilight of the elder days, when the world was still young, and the elves walked beneath the stars before the rising of the sun and moon, the destiny of one among them was forever altered by an encounter that rippled through the fate of Middle-earth. Elwë, known later as Eleuthingol, was not just any elf. He was one of the leaders of the Teleri, a noble people whose hearts were set upon the West, yearning for the light of Valinor. Yet it was not the light of the two trees that would define Elwë's path, but a softer, more mysterious glow, the luminous presence of Melian, the Maya. Their meeting was not orchestrated by fate alone, nor by command from above, but born from a moment of stillness, a pause in the great migrations of the elves. While journeying westward with his people, Elwë wandered alone beneath the shadowy eaves of Nan Elmoth, an ancient forest shrouded in silence and mystery. There, under the dark canopy, time seemed to pause, and the rustling leaves whispered of secrets older than memory. It was here that he heard the song. Melian, who had long wandered the forests of Middle-earth in solitude, was singing. Her voice echoed through the trees like a breeze from a forgotten paradise. It was not a song made of words, but of feeling, of longing, memory, and light. Elwë followed it, as if drawn by a thread spun from the very music that shaped the world. He found her there, radiant and serene, surrounded by the quiet hush of the woods, the stars glinting faintly through the canopy above. When their eyes met, neither spoke. They simply stood, held in the thrall of a moment so profound that the world outside of it faded into mist. For years they remained thus, locked in an enchantment of recognition and wonder. The stars wheeled above them, and the world turned, but in that grove of trees time stood still. Elwë's companions searched in vain, calling his name, but he did not return. He was no longer the same elf who had set out on the journey west. He had been changed, bound to a presence far older and deeper than even he could comprehend. Melian, though a Maya of Valinor, chose not to return to the lands of eternal light. She remained in Middle-earth, not as an emissary, not as a guide, but as an equal and partner to Elwë. When he finally reappeared, He was no longer merely a lord of the Teleri, he had been transfigured by the union with a being of divine nature. From that day he became known as Elu Thingol, meaning Thingol the Grey, a name that spoke of twilight, mystery, and the blending of mortal and immortal. Their union was unlike any before or since. Never before had Amaya taken one of the children of Iluvatar in love. Their joining was more than marriage. It was the fusion of the divine and the earthly, a thread woven directly into the fabric of the world's song. Together, they founded a kingdom deep in the heart of the forests, Doriath, the hidden kingdom. Doriath was not built with stone walls or iron gates, but with enchantment and spirit. Melian, using her divine essence, placed a protective barrier around the land, the girdle of Melian. It was an invisible wall of power, of confusion and misdirection, which shielded the kingdom from all who sought to enter it unbidden. The girdle was not merely a spell, it was an extension of her being, a song that sang continuously through the trees and rivers, a lullaby of protection that kept evil at bay for centuries. Under its cover, the trees grew tall and thick, the creatures of the forest flourished, and peace reigned in a way found nowhere else in Bellery. Thingol ruled as king, and Melian stood beside him as queen, not as a consort in name only, but as a true partner in power and governance. She counseled him with wisdom, beyond the reach of elves or men, and her guidance was often what held the delicate balance of the realm together. Thingol, proud and noble, listened to her, for he knew that her insight reached far beyond even the lore of the oldest Eldar. Yet he also remained his own master, and their dynamic was one of equality, of the mortal and the divine walking in tandem. Their court was famed for its beauty and majesty. The elves who lived in Doriath, the Sindar, grew wise and strong under their rule. They spoke of the queen with awe, referring to her as more than a queen. She was a light in the forest, a song in the stillness, the living heart of their homeland. Her presence alone was enough to soothe troubled minds and lift weary spirits. It was said that to be in her presence was to forget fear, to remember wonder, and to glimpse the glory of the world that had once been unmarred. But it was not all peace. The world beyond the girdle of Melian was darkening. The wars of the Silmarils raged. The sons of Fëanor brought pride and ruin with them, and Morgoth's shadow deepened in the north. Melian foresaw many of these changes, her foresight a burden that few could share. She warned Thingol often, though she knew that her words could only carry so far. The tension between divine insight and mortal will began to pull at their union. Yet still they stood strong together, and Doriath remained untouched for many long years. Their love bore fruit in the form of a child unlike any other, Luthien, their daughter, whose beauty surpassed even the greatest of the elves and whose destiny would reach into the hearts of men. Luthien, born of Maya and Elf, was the first of her kind, a bridge between two worlds, and a living testament to the depth of her parents' love. Her story would become legend, but it began in the peace and magic of Doriath. Nurtured by a mother who was once a spirit of song in Valinor, and a father who had waited long years in the shadowed woods just to behold her mother's face, the love between Melian and Thingol was not one of fiery passion or dramatic trials. It was steady, enduring and transformative. It shaped a kingdom, birthed a lineage, and held back the tides of darkness longer than might have otherwise been possible. But it also came with tragedy, for not even divine love is spared the cost of time and fate. Thingol's pride and choices would eventually lead to Doriath's doom, and Melian, grief-stricken and heartbroken, would at last abandon the mortal lands, retreating from the sorrow she could no longer bear. Yet the memory of their love remained. It lived in the ruins of Doriath, in the legends of the Sindar, and in the bloodlines that stretched from Luthien to Elrond, and even to the kings of men. Melian's love for Thingol was not just the tale of a Maya who descended into the world. It was the spark that lit a realm, the hand that sheltered a people, and the voice that whispered wisdom into the ear of a king. Their love was a stillness in the storm, a star in a darkening sky. It was proof that even in a world of conflict and sorrow, something as simple and profound as love could still change the course of history. Though Melian had once wandered the forests of Arda in quiet solitude, communing with nature and shaping the harmony of the world through song, her life took on a different meaning when she chose to remain in Middle-earth. As the Queen of Doriath and consort to Thingol, her role expanded far beyond mere companionship or ceremonial status. Melian was not only a figure of divine grace, but a powerful political presence, an oracle of wisdom, and a guardian of her people. Through her guidance and influence, the kingdom of Doriath thrived and endured longer than most realms in the chaos of the First Age. In the heart of the forest realm, Melian's presence was like a constant murmur beneath the surface of life. The people of Doriath revered her as more than their queen. She was the soul of their land, the one who could still the tempests in their hearts with a glance or quiet a gathering storm with a whisper. Melian's wisdom was old beyond reckoning, drawn not from books or study, but from her origin as one of the Aina, the holy spirits that existed before the world was made. She carried in her voice echoes of the music of the Aina, and that resonance touched everything she spoke to or touched. In matters of governance, Melian was both counsel and conscience. Thingol, proud and at times headstrong, was a mighty king, and loved by his people, but even he knew the limits of his foresight. When the dark clouds began to gather in the distant corners of Beleriand, when whispers of Morgoth's return reached their ears, when the Noldor came out of the west with sorrow in their eyes and fire in their hearts, it was Melian who understood the deeper threads woven into these events. She warned Thingol to be cautious, especially concerning the arrival of the sons of Feanor. Their bright words and bold presence stirred awe among the elves of Beleriand, but Melian saw the doom that trailed behind them like a shadow. She understood the terrible oath they had sworn, and the blood that would surely be spilled because of it. Her counsel, offered with gentleness but firm clarity, urged Thingol to remain wary, to keep Doriath separate from their conflicts. It was in large part due to her warnings that Thingol chose to isolate his kingdom, maintaining neutrality in the greater war of the Silmarils for as long as possible, and yet even the most prophetic words cannot always turn the tides of fate. Melian's role as a political advisor was complicated by the fact that she was in many ways not bound to the same world as the others. Though she had chosen to live among the children of Ilúvatar, her thoughts often turned to matters far removed from mortal concerns. She saw further and deeper, but sometimes her insights were dismissed or misunderstood by those who could not grasp the scope of her vision. Even Thingol, who loved her dearly, struggled at times to fully heed her words. Still, Melian's influence was felt in every aspect of Doriath's governance, from the arrangement of its council to its dealings with neighboring realms. Her hand was present. She sought peace and preservation, valuing balance and wisdom above glory and conquest. Doriath, under her co-rule, became a sanctuary, not just in a physical sense, but in spirit, a place where the chaos of the outer world could not penetrate, and where thought and art, song and learning, could flourish. Melian's protection extended beyond political savvy. Her most renowned act as protector was the casting of the Girdle of Melian. This vast enchantment surrounded Doriath like an invisible veil, woven of her own essence and imbued with a power that could turn back enemies and mislead even the mightiest of foes. None could enter without her will, and those who tried found themselves lost in the woods, turned around, or driven to despair by confusion. This mystical barrier was not merely a magical defense, it was a manifestation of Melian herself, her will and love for the people of Doriath given shape and permanence. It was her answer to the darkness creeping ever closer. The girdle was more than protection, it was a symbol. It signified that Doriath was different, a place where the old harmony of the world was still remembered, still held sacred. Even as other kingdoms rose and fell, caught in the tides of war, Doriath remained, encircled by song and spirit, and so it became a beacon to many. Wanderers and exiles sought shelter within its bounds. Refugees from the ruin of other lands found hope beneath the trees of the hidden kingdom. Melian welcomed them with compassion, but she was always vigilant. Her judgment was keen, and she sensed the true nature of those who came before they even spoke. As the years passed and the war of the Silmarils raged on, Melian's task as protector grew heavier. She bore the sorrow of the world silently, watching as kingdoms crumbled and alliances broke. Her foresight allowed her to see these tragedies before they occurred, but that knowledge did not make them any easier to bear. Her warnings became more frequent, more urgent, but even she could not prevent all that was to come. In her heart, Melian carried a tension, an eternal struggle between hope and foreknowledge. She had seen the threads of fate, the doom that lay ahead, but she had also chosen to love, to protect, to nurture. This balance of divine detachment and mortal compassion defined her reign. She was not omnipotent, and her presence in Middle-earth came with limitations. She could not rewrite the destiny of the world, but she could try to soften its blows, delay its tragedies, and offer sanctuary to those who would listen. When Doriath finally began to unravel, when Thingol grew proud, and made fatal choices that Melian had feared for so long, she remained at his side. Even when he ignored her counsel, even when her heart grew heavy with foreboding, she stayed. It was not until his death, sudden, brutal and senseless, that her role as protector finally ended. The girdle fell, its magic dissolved with her grief. Without Thingol, her anchor in the world of flesh and stone was gone. Melian had walked the mortal world out of love, and with love torn from her, she could no longer bear the weight of her own sorrow. She departed Middle-earth, returning to Valinan, but she left behind a legacy that would never fade. The peace of Doriath, its mystery, its resistance against the tides of evil, all bore her mark. The line of Luthien continued through the ages, and Melian's wisdom lived on in the stories and bloodlines of elves and men alike. In every whispered prayer offered in the twilight of the forest, in every tale of hidden sanctuaries and wise queens who sang to the stars, Melian's spirit lingered. Her role as advisor and protector was not defined by war or conquest, but by steadfastness, love, and the gentle, unwavering strength of a spirit who chose to dwell among the children of the world. Of all the powers and personalities that touched the story of Middle-earth, few bore such quiet but profound significance as Melian's daughter, Luthien. The birth of Luthien Tinuviel was not just a personal moment of joy for Melian and Thingol. It was an event that resonated across the ages, shaping destinies far beyond the borders of Doriath. Born of a Maya and an elf, Luthien embodied a union of two worlds, and from this union arose a being of unparalleled beauty, power, and will. Melian's relationship with her daughter was marked by deep affection, fierce protection, and the quiet sorrow of one who sees the strands of fate already woven. Melian understood from the beginning that Luthien was special in ways even her father could not grasp. To most, she was the fairest of the children of Iluvatar, a light in the darkness whose songs could bring peace to troubled hearts, and whose presence inspired love and awe in equal measure. But Melian knew her daughter's spirit held something deeper, an unshakable strength, an echo of divinity wrapped in the fragile garb of mortality. She saw in Luthien not only her own mere grace, but also the fire of Thingol's elven pride, and a heart capable of choosing boldly, even in the face of doom. From Luthien's earliest years, Melian nurtured her gently, not only with maternal love, but with a quiet shaping of wisdom. While Thingol gave her safety and a kingdom that adored her, it was Melian who fed her with visions of the world beyond, the music of the stars, the slow turning of ages, the sorrows and joys of Arda. Their bond was not of command, but of communion. Luthien trusted her mother deeply, turning to her not for permission, but for understanding, and Melian, ever careful not to burden her child with too much foreknowledge, offered guidance in glances, in silence, in the occasional somber note in a song that warned of paths best not taken. Yet even the most watchful mother cannot shield her child from fate. When Luthien met Beren, the mortal man whose love for her would become legend, Melian's foresight stirred into storm. She saw the threads of doom and glory twist together in ways even she could not untangle. She knew that Luthien's heart had chosen, and that no wall of magic or word of warning could unmake that bond. Still, she spoke to Thingol with urgency, trying to temper his pride before it sparked a tragedy. But Thingol, overcome by elven arrogance, issued a near-impossible quest to Beren, to retrieve a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth himself, as the price for his daughter's hand. Melian grieved the choice, though she did not interfere. She understood that to resist Luthien's path was to do violence to her spirit. Her daughter was not a vessel to be controlled. She was a flame that could not be quenched. And so, with the sorrow only a Maya could feel, a sorrow touched by the weight of eternity, Melian let her daughter go. Even in Luthien's absence, Melian remained connected to her. She sensed her daughter's struggles across distance and darkness. She felt the beat of her heart as Luthien defied the will of her father, escaped the bounds of Doriath, and journeyed into the wild to find her love. Melian, though heartbroken, never allowed her grief to turn to bitterness. Instead, she held the peace of Doriath with quiet resolve, hoping that the sanctuary she had created would one day welcome her daughter home again. Luthien's deeds were the stuff of legend. She faced Morgoth, the greatest enemy the world had ever known, in the depths of Angband. With her voice and will, she brought even the Dark Lord to his knees. No army stood with her, no weapon greater than her song. She wove sleep and sorrow into the air and stole from Morgoth what none before had managed, a Silmaril from his iron crown. And in this the impossible quest was fulfilled, not by the might of a warrior, but by the resolve of a woman who refused to be parted from love. When Luthien returned with Beren, scarred but victorious, Melian welcomed her not as a queen receiving a subject, but as a mother embracing her heart. Yet there was no pure joy in the reunion. Melian knew that the Silmaril, though beautiful, carried the doom of all who touched it. It was no gift, but a shard of a greater discord. And while the love between Beren and Luthien was deep and true, it had already begun to attract the winds of fate. Thingol, unable to let go of his pride, claimed the Silmaril for himself, setting into motion the chain of events that would lead to his own demise and the unraveling of Doriath. Through it all, Melian watched with a kind of silent endurance. She had always known that her daughter's story would not be one of peace and longevity. Luthien was born of two worlds, and she would ultimately choose to leave both behind. When Beren fell to mortal death, Luthien followed him beyond the veil, standing before the powers of the world to plead for his return. And such was her spirit, such was the force of her love, that even the rulers of fate were moved. Beren was restored to life, and Luthien chose to become mortal herself, to live and die with him as a human woman. In that choice, Melian felt the deepest wound of all. Her daughter would pass beyond the circles of the world. As a Maya, Melian could not follow. Even among all her knowledge and foresight, the fate of men lay in a mystery beyond her reach. Luthien's path had taken her where Melian could not go. It was a parting deeper than death, a separation that no magic or power could bridge. Melian bore it with grace, but in her soul, a light dimmed. She had lost not only a daughter, but a part of herself that could never return. Yet in that loss, something greater was born. Through Luthien the blood of the Ainur entered the mortal world. Through her line would come Elrond and Elros, Arwen and Aragorn, and ultimately the renewal of the kingdoms of men. Melian's legacy, once woven in spells and song, now lived on in flesh and will. Her love had passed into the world not only as legend, but as lineage. In the end, Melian left Doriath, returning to Valinor in grief. Her kingdom had fallen, her beloved Thingol slain, and her daughter lost beyond even her reach. But her influence endured. The peace she had nurtured, the love she had given, and the strength she had instilled in her daughter continued to echo through the histories of elves and men. And in quiet groves and whispered songs, some still say that Melian's spirit lingers, listening for the echo of Luthien's voice in the wind. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like and subscribe for more, and stay curious.